So our first Leadership Award recipient is Beth Hebron. And Beth's going to come up in a couple of minutes. Absolutely, and that's not the only time you're going to clap for Beth. Beth's going to come up in a couple of minutes and accept this award. But why did this happen? You know, these awards are selected by the ALS community themselves. And I think that Beth's advocacy, her outspokenness on social media and in person and otherwise has undoubtedly been something that we've all seen and been touched by. You know, this Leadership Award situation isn't just about raising the most money. It's about having an impact and getting things done. And we are just so privileged as an institute to, on behalf of the ALS community, provide this recognition to Beth Hebron. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage. And Beth has loaded her remarks onto an iPad, which I'm going to play here.
Hello everyone. Back in March, my father and I went to Washington, D.C. to meet with the FDA, Hope Now for ALS, and several ALS patients to discuss accelerated approval for GM604. However, Beth went in with a pipe dream to ask the FDA to work with us to get treatments to the patients faster through clinical trial reform. We all want a treatment and a cure, let's call it Prince Charming, but we have to kiss a lot of frogs to find him. But trials can cost millions of dollars, and as we know, not one successful drug has come along for ALS patients. This is because ALS drugs tend to get roadblocked at the most expensive phase 3 clinical trials. Phase 3 trials are conducted as double-blind placebo trials with one group of patients receiving the treatment drug and the other a placebo. For the trial to be successful, there must either be a dramatic difference in the results between the two groups, or the placebo and non-placebo group need to be almost identical in rate of progression with regard to the trial's primary endpoint. The problem here is that with a heterogeneous disease like ALS, no two patients progress the same. There is no average ALS patient, which is why trial after trial has failed, leaving patients to demand access to these failed drugs from their doctors, writing their congressmen, and petitioning for accelerated approval. But how can we expect the FDA to give us access to a drug that on paper doesn't work? The answer is this: we have to find a new way of testing these drugs, a way to test these drugs that will prove efficacy. This idea came about last year after my family and I attended this research summit where we heard all about the precision medicine program. A program that would not only sequence patients' genomes and bank iPS cells, but would also monitor patient progression with speech tracking, ALS-FRS surveys, and activity tracking with the use of accelerometers. Most of it went over my head, but my dad, on the other hand, went into businessman mode and the wheels started turning. And then he read an article about a company called Recipient, who had entered a team of non-clinicians in the Prize for Life competition to find an algorithm that was able to predict ALS progression, and they won. And that's when it all came together. He thought, what if there was a way to design a new form of clinical trials, where efficacy was judged by comparing predicted progression to actual progression post-treatment? The algorithm would be fueled by data on actual trial participants that typically isn't available, but that PMP is already busy creating? It could be a whole new world. One where drugs are given to patients and not placebos. One where efficacy could be proved. Take me to this land of lollipops, rainbows, and treatments, please. Give me my independence, cure me. But wait, an idea is great. How do we bring it to reality? We need to get to a point where a drug can be approved at phase 2. Right now we are targeting 3 areas where changes need to occur. First, trial exclusion criteria is outdated and does not reflect progress in the clinical care of ALS patients. For example, the 2 years since diagnosis exclusion point was adopted in the belief that patients who were further in time from diagnosis were likely to die mid-trial, reducing the trial's statistical effectiveness. That assumption needs to be challenged as developments in ventilation and other symptom-relieving medications and therapies prolong life. I can't begin to tell you how many trials I am excluded from because I'm 2 years past my diagnosis date, or because I use a BiPAP. It's infuriating because I know I am progressing slowly and won't up and die in the middle of the trial. Second, placebo reliance is no longer necessary as the development of accurate disease progression algorithms allows for the use of virtual placebo designs. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the tyranny of the less than 0.05 p-value requirement does not properly reflect the situation that ALS has no current effective treatment option and is always fatal. Using the same standard for approval with ALS as is used for non-fatal condition treatments is insane and absurd and must change. A groundswell of support for right-to-try legislation is just one indicator of the mood of our nation to change how the FDA operates when it comes to fatal diseases. But we need to channel that frustration towards supporting a new trial design the FDA can get behind. Our proposal for changing trial design has received a guarded positive response from the FDA. We are now actively soliciting support from drug/treatment developers to test it. I was elated to be told I would receive this award, because it validated all the work we have done thus far. But that moment is fleeting because it only further reminded me of how far we have to go still. Because every day, hell, every hour of this fight the landscape changes. For instance, last year I would have walked into this room and would have stood here, reading my speech instead of having this Heather woman read it for me. Instead today I am sitting in a wheelchair. Speaking more than a few sentences at a time is exhausting. Hell, taking a shower feels like I'm running a damn marathon. But whether you're talking to the FDA, Hope Now for ALS, ALSA, TDI, the patients, we all want the same thing, a cure. It's time for us to put our egos aside because together we can all realize my dream of ridding the world of the dragon that is ALS and finding our Prince Charming. So thank you to those who nominated me and TDI, but above all else thank you to my friends, siblings and my mom for supporting me and believing in me. And a special thank you to my dad for fearlessly charging our efforts. Thank you.